The rain had been falling since late evening, coating the streets in a glossy sheen. By the time midnight rolled around, the town felt dead. No headlights passing, no pedestrians hurrying by. Inside the McDonald's, the smell of fryer oil clung to the air, and the only sounds were the low rumble of the ventilation system and the occasional sizzle from the grill. Jenna was working the closing shift alone at the front counter. Her only company was the cook, Mario, who was in the back prepping the grill for the night. The store was spotless, the chairs already stacked on the tables, and the clock over the soda machine ticked toward 12:15 a.m. That was when the drive-thru headset crackled. It startled her, not because of the noise, but because there hadn't been a single order in over an hour. Then a voice came through, deep, slow, almost deliberate. "Plain cheeseburger. No greeting, no please, no thank you, just the order." She turned toward the monitor to see who it was. The drive-thru camera showed a blurry, static-filled image of a dark sedan idling at the menu board. The feed was so degraded, she couldn't even make out a license plate, only the outline of a hooded figure behind the wheel. Jenna packaged the burger quickly and stepped up to the window. When she slid it open, the man inside turned his head toward her. The parking lot's sodium vapor lights gave his skin a pale, washed-out look. His hood shadowed most of his face, but she could see his mouth. His lips curled into a smile, not friendly but stretched too wide, too long. She handed him the bag. "That's one plain cheeseburger," she said, forcing a smile. He didn't speak. He just accepted the bag, smiled even wider, and drove off slowly. At 12:42 a.m., the headset crackled again. Same voice. This time he asked for a large black coffee. Her stomach tightened. She looked at the monitor. It was the same sedan, same static over the feed, same hooded figure, but her eyes flicked to the passenger seat this time and froze. The bag she had just given him earlier was still there, untouched. When she handed him the coffee, she caught a whiff of something strange, like wet earth and mildew, faint but unmistakable. This time, he said something. "Perfect," he whispered, as though he was talking to himself. Then he drove away without taking a sip. At 1:05 a.m., he returned again. "Apple pie," he said, voice dragging over the words like they were heavy. By now, Jenna's nerves were fraying. She told Mario, who shrugged it off. Probably bored, maybe lonely. She prepared the pie, slid open the window, and gave him the bag. "You've been coming through a lot tonight. You okay, sir?" she asked. His smile twitched, then returned, wider than before. "Just passing the time." When he pulled away, she watched the red taillights vanish into the rain. But a few minutes later, the headset came to life again. "You forgot my napkins," the voice said. Her blood ran cold. The monitor showed the drive-thru lane, completely empty. No car, no headlights. Nothing but rain falling in the glow of the floodlights. Jenna tore the headset off. She stayed behind the locked counter until closing time. Mario offered to walk her to her car, but she insisted she'd be fine. Still, before leaving, she went into the office to grab her purse. That's when she saw it. On her desk sat the cheeseburger, the coffee, and the pie, perfectly arranged in a neat stack, and resting on top of them, folded precisely, 3 unused napkins. The rain outside hadn't let up, but the air in that office was still, silent, heavy. She didn't hear the back door open. She didn't hear footsteps. But as she stepped into the hallway to leave, she could swear she caught sight of a shadow slipping around the corner toward the stockroom, smiling as it went. I used to be the closing manager at a McDonald's just off the interstate. It was one of those standalone buildings with a brightly lit PlayPlace attached to the side. A glass-fronted room full of twisting plastic slides, padded platforms, and a ball pit that had been there since the late 90s. In the daytime, it was loud and chaotic, packed with kids. At night, it became something entirely different. We closed the PlayPlace to customers after 10 p.m., but the restaurant itself stayed open for the drive-thru until 2 a.m. It was my job to lock the PlayPlace doors, turn off the lights, and check that no one was still inside. I'd done it 100 times without thinking twice, but one rainy Saturday night changed that. It was just after midnight, the rain tapping against the tall PlayPlace windows, when I heard something that didn't belong, the sound of laughter. Not loud, joyful laughter like kids make in the daytime. This was soft, almost muffled. It seemed to echo from the plastic tunnels themselves. I froze in front of the monitor wall in the office. The grainy black and white CCTV feed for the PlayPlace showed movement, something shifting in the tunnel near the top of the slide. The figure was small, maybe the size of a child, but the way it moved was wrong. It didn't crawl the way kids do. It jerked, like its limbs weren't bending properly. Thinking maybe someone had hidden during closing checks, I grabbed my flashlight and the master key ring. The dining room was empty, the air smelling faintly of fryer grease and disinfectant. My shoes squeaked as I walked toward the PlayPlace door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. The air was heavy, almost humid, and it carried a strange scent: plastic, wet carpet, and something faintly metallic. The lights were off, but the dim glow from the parking lot filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting streaks of silver across the floor. I scanned the area. The colorful tubes above my head were silent. The ball pit sat still in the corner, shadows pooled in its center. I called out, "Hello? We're closed." My voice sounded too loud in the empty space. That's when I heard it, so faint I thought I imagined it at first. A whisper, high-pitched sing-song, "Come play." The sound wasn't coming from the tunnels, it was coming from the ball pit. Slowly, I stepped closer, my flashlight beam shaking just slightly in my hand. The plastic balls were shifting, tiny, almost imperceptible movements, as if something underneath was pushing upward. My brain screamed at me to turn around and leave, but I took one more step. A small hand broke the surface, not a normal child's hand. It was unnaturally thin, the skin pale and stretched tight over long fingers. The fingernails were too long, yellowed at the tips, and they tapped softly against the surrounding plastic balls, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Then it beckoned, one slow curl of the fingers. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I took a step back, my heel catching on the leg of a chair. As I steadied myself, I heard movement above me, something crawling fast through the plastic tubes. The sound circled overhead, the hollow thuds and scrapes echoing inside the enclosed space, before it stopped directly above me. For a few seconds there was nothing, no sound, no movement. Then, slowly, something began to scrape against the inside of the tunnel walls, like nails dragging on hard plastic. That was enough. I turned and bolted out of the PlayPlace, slamming the door behind me and locking it with trembling hands. My pulse was still racing when I made it back to the office. I glanced at the CCTV monitor, telling myself I wouldn't see anything. But there it was. On every camera angle, the ball pit sat perfectly still, except for one detail. That pale, bony hand was still visible, sticking out from the center. Slowly it lifted, waved once, and then sank back beneath the surface. I never closed the PlayPlace alone again. Working the overnight shift at McDonald's always felt like living in a different world. One where time moved slower, shadows seemed thicker, and reality felt a little off. The lobby closed at midnight, leaving only the drive-thru open until 3 a.m. From that point on, the store went eerily quiet. I'd hear the low hum of the fryers, the faint rattle of the ventilation fan above the grills, and the occasional snap from the intercom headset when it picked up stray static. Most nights we'd get just a couple of cars, usually truckers grabbing coffee or someone desperate for a late-night meal. But this night, it was different. At 2:31 a.m., the headset came alive with a sharp crackle. Then a voice. It wasn't raspy or loud, just strange. The tone was completely flat, like the person wasn't speaking to me but reciting. 1 cheeseburger, no onions. I waited for the order screen to display the request, but it stayed blank. Normally, the words would appear as the customer spoke. I glanced at the monitor showing the order post. No car, just an empty lane. Thinking it might be a glitch, I said, "Could you repeat that, please?" The same words came back, identical in pitch and timing. 1 cheeseburger, no onions. My stomach tightened. I manually rang in the burger anyway, placed it in a small bag, and walked over to the drive-thru window expecting headlights to appear. Nothing. The lane was empty, silent. I leaned halfway out the window to get a better look. Not a sound, not a movement. The night air felt unnaturally still, like the whole parking lot was holding its breath. I went back inside, tossed the untouched burger into the bin, and told myself it was just the intercom picking up some old radio frequency. Then at 2:43 a.m., the voice returned. 1 cheeseburger, no onions. The exact same tone, same pause between words. Only this time, I heard something faint in the background. A rhythmic tapping like fingernails on metal. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the back to check the security monitor that covered the order post. There was movement. Someone was there. Not under the light where I could make out a face, but just far enough back that the shadow swallowed every detail. They were tall, too tall, thin, and absolutely still. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The figure tilted its head ever so slightly toward the camera, then vanished between frames. I backed away from the monitor, heart pounding. At 2:51, the intercom popped again. This time, the voice whispered, "You forgot my order." I froze. My eyes flicked to the monitor. The lane was empty again, until the shadow appeared right under the window camera. The glass in front of me fogged up in a small, precise circle, as though someone had leaned forward and exhaled. But there was nothing there. The lights above me flickered. The hum of the fryers cut out, leaving only silence. Then came the sound of paper crinkling. I looked down at the receipt printer. It was printing, but there was no order in the system. The slip of paper slid out slowly, like it was struggling to feed through. On it was a single line. 1 cheeseburger, no onions. The exact same order, time-stamped 3 a.m. sharp. I called my manager the next morning, but she brushed it off as some kind of prank. But here's the thing, the receipt. It wasn't logged in our POS system at all. It shouldn't exist. And a week later, when I worked the same shift at the same time, the headset crackled again. 1 cheeseburger, no onions. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.